Welcome to Business and Investing with Grant and Charley, where we are enhancing your complete set of skills to build wealth inside and outside your business. I'm going to start off today with a joke, Charley.
Lay down.
James, you're a guest. Why did the businessman cross the road?
To get to the other side.
To get to the other side of the profit margin.
You should be a dad, bro. You need to be a dad. You need a kid.
I'm trying. All right. James, second joke. Why did the business owner sign up to the Business and Investing newsletter?
Because he wanted to make more money.
That's exactly right. So if you're listening to this and you are a business owner that's sitting there saying, I want to invest inside and outside my business, head over to businessandinvesting.com/newsletter. Put in your details and you won't be a joke. I am a joke. You won't be a joke. And you'll actually get notified every single time we release one of these episodes. Now, before I ruin this intro, let's cue the disclaimer.
It's Charley here from Business and Investing, and I need to let you know that Grant, myself, and the Business and Investing team are in no way, shape, or form qualified to give you personal or specific financial advice. We strongly encourage you seek out and use professionals when you are making investment decisions or comparing investment products. All right, Grant, I feel like we should do a double disclaimer on this episode. Would you like to know why?
Because that was a terrible joke.
Well, first off, actually, we need a triple. So, disclaimer, we're sorry for that intro. We are actually sorry for that intro. That's my first disclaimer. It's not even a disclaimer. That's just an apology to the audience. Now, the second one is our disclaimer covers financial advice. So, we make it very clear that we are not qualified to give financial advice, and people should definitely not listen to this podcast to make individualized investment decisions. But to go even further than that, we are less qualified to give health advice. Way less qualified. So to be clear, you and I host a podcast where we're not allowed to give advice on the topic it covers, number one, and then we bring on guests on other topics we're also not qualified or allowed to give advice on.
Yes.
That's what we do.
That was literally the hypothesis of this podcast before we started it.
What could go wrong?
Show.
I was going to say, this is brilliant. This is a great setup.
It's actually amazing this show's got any traction at all, James, isn't it?
I was going to say, you should have another disclaimer. It's like nobody should ever watch or listen to this show, ever. Just period.
I'm feeling a brand change name again, Grant. This is not advice, right? And we cover all the topics where people just, I'm supposed to talk about it. Like, you're not allowed, we're not qualified to give advice on this, but, this is how the game works. And it just seems all ridiculous. But nonetheless, I will point this out is that you and I are not qualified to give health advice. However, our guest today is, and is also very adept in helping people with their health. And I think it's going to be a really important episode. So to strike this one up, to set the context of today's episode, one of the things I find most fascinating in business is how many stories there are of the business owner who neglected their health and then later in life has to spend all their money to fix their health, right? It's like very, very counterintuitive to health in itself. It's like, of course, like it's ridiculous. But to take it further, and this is what I really want to dig into today, is I think it's easy to piece together the idea that, you just don't want to be unhealthy so you don't have to fix your health later. But there's a whole nother layer to this about like how much opportunity cost did you miss while in business or wealth building because your health was shit? Like you were never performing at the level to make good decisions or do business well. You kind of slogged it out and screwed yourself on multiple layers. And I'm endlessly fascinated in this. I know you and I, Grant, have both neglected our health massively at times and paid the price for that. But I think we should unpack this because with a bigger level of awareness, I think it might be one of the most important investments we make is our health. So today on the show, we have James Cant from JCF, who's a good friend and also someone I've seen get immensely powerful results from people in this space. Welcome to the show, James.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
It is our absolute pleasure. I'm going to kick this one off. Actually, before I do, would you be able to give just a brief overview of what you do? I think some context of what you do would be great here.
Yeah, so we predominantly work with men and business owners who have lost their mojo. You wake up in the morning, we've all met that person who's in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, who wakes up in the morning, they're tired when they wake up. The first thing they need to reach for is a coffee, caffeine pill or some form of stimulant, ciggy, joint, line of coke, like depending on what investment, what area you're in, banking. So you've got. I should have. I need to do a disclaimer too, don't I? It's like I'm a moron. You should not listen to anything that I say ever. Period. But yeah. So
this guy listens to the show. He knows how it works.
Yes. This is a show full of disclaimers.
So really, like we work with guys and business owners who they've lost their mojo. They're not as energetic as what they'd like to be. Getting stress, anxiety, depression, all that sort of stuff. Pretty much everything that I went through a few years ago, that's who we help now.
Fantastic. So first question I want to get into. How does poor physical and mental health actually affect our performance like today? Not the later in life stuff, but like today.
Yeah. Have you ever been hungover? Of course you haven't, Charley. But like
I have though. I'm a normal person.
Yeah, great. Grant's been hungover before. Now, Grant, when you were hungover, or even when you were drunk, did you make better or worse decisions than when you felt amazing a couple of days before getting hungover or drunk?
I would argue he makes some delicious decisions when he's hungover. So might actually make better decisions hungover.
Well, because my food intake sucks outside of those times. I would suggest that my decision-making skills would be worse.
Yeah. And so, okay, let's say that you're running a business and now you've got to choose whether or not to hire someone, whether or not to fire someone. You're dealing with clients. Would you rather be sober or hungover when you're doing that?
Oh, it's sober.
Yeah, right?
10 times.
Because you'll function way better. So the thing is that when we're not healthy, when we have what I would call systemic inflammation throughout the body, when we have damage throughout our body, when our nervous system isn't functioning well, and I'll touch on that in a big deal, you're effectively being hungover. And it's like, I haven't drunk for a while, but I used to hit the piss pretty hard when I was younger. Funnily enough, I really stopped drinking when I turned 18. But before then, I was a savage on it. I still got hungovers when I was before 18, which is such a G up. But anyway, when I was
wait. Once again, not health advice.
Yeah, not health
Continue
advice.
on.
Definitely. When I was hungover, I used to just do dumb shit. I couldn't think properly. I got brain fog. I just felt like I was kind of in this autopilot daze, and I got nothing done whatsoever. Just energy was super low. Everything just sucked when I was like that. If you have poor health, that is what you are like. I'm sure we've all had those moments in life where everything you touch, it's like it just turns to gold. No matter what you do, you just win. Every decision you make is just great. That is my life now. It's amazing. You should come join me. But it's like when you are really clear, when you are really on point, when your mind is just crystal clear and focused, everything gets easy. And I was like, fuck, business is hard enough as it is. Why the hell would you want to make it harder by having your decision-making process impaired? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm lazy, right? Inherently very, very lazy. And so I want to make everything as easy as possible all the time. I just want to stack the deck in my favor so that I can win. You know, what are the statistics? It's like 9 in 10 businesses fail within the first 4 years or something like that. And then afterwards, however many more fail. You look at all these guys, it's like it's hard enough as it is. And you look at most of them, the reason why they fail is because they burn out. Businesses have got different stages. We go through the startup phase. We just worried about sales and marketing. Then you go through the growth and scaling phase where you start worrying about employees and hiring and all that stuff. And then you start going through acquisitions. And what we see a lot of the time, and I'm sure you guys would have seen plenty of this too, the business owner will work their ass off to get through this first hustle and grind phase, which is just get the fucking sale in, get some money in. Like, we just got to stay afloat. And then you work up and you're doing couple of $1 million turnover, and you start employing people. And you get to this stage of employing people and you're like, I'm just rooted. I've worked my ass off for the last 5 years to get here. I don't have any more energy to now push on into the next stage. And that's where a lot of people sell, they give up, they quit, or they just don't grow and they stay stagnant and never get any further because they just simply don't have any more gas in the tank. And it could be so much easier if you just actually look after your health. And I'm not saying you've got to fucking eat, 3 sprigs of asparagus and chicken breast every single day. That's not what I'm talking about. You don't have to be a bodybuilder but more focusing on health specific to what a business owner needs. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you described Grant's diet when he's not hungover. This is my point. See, this is why he makes deliciously good decisions on hungover. We get him off the asparagus and chicken breast. But tying back into your analogy there, James, and I really like that, it's very digestible to understand, is that those first few years in business are like getting on the piss. That is the experience of it. And then the hangover portion comes and collects at some point. That is what many people are faced with. I know myself. Now, Grant, is this striking any chords for you at all?
Just a couple. So back when I started at a company called Focus HQ, my peak physical, I won't lie, 4-pack was coming out. Definitely not a 6-pack, not a 2-pack. 4-pack was coming out. Meditation every day, I was on point. And then I got to about year 3, stopped yoga, stopped meditating, stopped eating healthy. And it was like that for about a year. And I still remember this conversation vividly. I was talking to one of my co-founders and I'm like, I looked back and I'm like, I have just realized that the last year I didn't make great decisions. I wasn't a good person to be around. And he's like, yeah, you weren't. To the point that I was talking to other people around how I can better approach telling you that you were kind of screwing the business over because your personal life went to crap. And so I had gained weight. I wasn't doing all of these things. And it was funny how my decisions became worse. The way that I would show up to the business was worse. I couldn't work as long hours. I couldn't do all these things, but it was just such a natural decline.
Can over a period of time, how did your personal life, as you were going backwards, how did that result in you making poor decisions? What were some of the poor decisions that you made and how did you negatively impact the company?
Yeah, so one of the big ones was not being able to see people that I should have recruited and trying to own everything myself, right? Because I wasn't stopping and thinking and going, well, should I delegate this task? Should I get someone else to do it? What is the second order consequence of if I delay doing this task because I'm trying to do everything myself? But also then I couldn't do the grind the same way. So I'd push up into the afternoons or evenings and I'm like, don't crash. And then I'm like, I'm crashing. I'd have another cup of coffee. And then I'm like, oh, you know what I'm going to do, James? Genius idea. I'm going to skip the gym today. And then I'm like, I don't have time for a meditation. None of this time, which means that everything else that sort of reset myself and reclarified everything, I just stopped doing because the time to put into the business was more important. And then it was just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Can I expand on those two? Because they're two really cool ones and super common.
Go for it. That's what we got you here for.
Cool.
Tell me how
terrible
this
do I have to do another disclaimer or what? But
potentially we'll see how you do.
We'll go. Just interrupt if you need to. But so we'll start with the second one first there, which is where you have low energy. And this is the most common business owner thing all the time. When you wake up tired in the morning, what do? You go reach for a coffee. Right?
Damn straight.
Coffee, cigarette, some people joint or cocaine, bankers.
Wait,
right?
There's your disclaimer point.
Yeah, there's a disclaimer point, right? I'm not recommending you do that, right? Or do if you enjoy it, if you like it, whatever. I'm not here to judge you. I got a funny story on that too. But pretty much when you wake up in the morning, you reach for a stimulant. That's the very first thing that you do. Now, what most people don't think of, right? They don't think of why am I waking up tired this morning? Why has this occurred? They just say, I am tired, therefore I need to fix it, right? Which is kind of logical. But if you don't know the root cause of it, then you're never going to fix the actual issue. You say, I'm tired, therefore I need more energy, so I'm going to smash a coffee to give me a little bit more adrenaline, a little bit more dopamine, and that's going to get me through. And what that actually does is that caffeine sits in your nervous system, right? The nervous system is it's like your brain and all the nerves throughout your body. It controls every single thought, feeling, mood, action, reaction. Every decision that you make in your life is regulated by this. Specifically, one part of it called the autonomic nervous system, right? This is like your fight or flight and rest and digest. You may have heard of those terms before. And so within this nervous system, what you're doing with the caffeine is you're jacking it up, right? You're getting it going. You're getting a little bit more adrenaline happening. You're shifting yourself into a stressed out state, right? A fight or flight state. See, when our body is stressed out, we're more energetic. So for example, have you guys ever not eaten for a prolonged period of time, done a fast for a day or 2 days or something like that?
Definitely. We're both in the fasting camp now.
There you go. You feel wired, don't you? Like
Totally.
wired after what you'd
Love
think.
it.
I didn't eat. You're like, I didn't eat. I should have less energy, but you get more. So that's an evolutionary thing where when we're starving, you don't want to relax and chill out because you're not going to get any food, right? Let's go back 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 years ago. When you're starving, you need to fucking get up and go, because if you don't get up and go, you're not going to go and catch that deer. If that deer walks past and it's the first deer you've seen in a month, right? It's the only bit of food you've seen and you're like, fuck it, too tired, right? You're going to die. So those people who did that, they're dead. They never survived. Whereas the people who were like wired and waiting for that deer went up, slit its throat, and then have gone and eaten it. And that's created us now, right? And that's how we've come. So whenever you are in this fight or flight stage, you're going to be super energetic and super hyped up. And caffeine is pushing us into this fight or flight stage. Now, the one downside of this is that when we're in fight or flight, yes, we have loads of energy, but we also don't sleep well. We don't recover well. Why? Because we need to be alert. We're in fight or flight because we need to be alert. Going back once again to our evolutionary roots, if you're starving, you need to be alert, but also if a tiger's going to come and eat you, probably not the best time for a nap, right? So you want to be awake. So it's going to keep you amped up and it's going to keep you wired, which is then going to mean that you're not going to sleep terribly well at night. Now, what happens when we don't sleep well at night? Wake up tired the next day, right? And so what do we do when we wake up tired the next day? Let's have another
Two coffees.
Two coffees, right? And now we're twice
as
as wired and we're great because it feels fucking awesome to be stimmed off our heads, right? And then so that night we sleep even worse. So the next day, what do we have? 3 coffees, right? And it just goes on and on and on and on, right? And we actually see this a lot. We've worked with a lot of truck drivers. Coffee's a gateway drug, all right? Grant, be careful. Coffee's a great gateway drug. We actually have a lot of truck drivers who come to us who are hooked on meth and speed. And they use meth and speed like sometimes actually just light up the glass Barbie and have a little toke. Sometimes they're on prescription things, like you see a lot of guys using modafinil. I used to punch a heap of modafinil back in the day. Dexamphetamines, all the legal prescription drugs, they're on them to keep themselves awake because now coffee has no effect on them whatsoever because they've desensitized it, because their nervous system is so fucked up. Does that make sense?
Completely.
And so,
can I share a story on this one? Because I'm interested on your take to go into this further, because my experience is opposite to Grant's. So Grant got into business. Let's say his business got hard and then he neglected his health. And I neglected my health, but in a different way. Is I started riding a bike because I found it helped me cope with the stress of business. And then that escalated to riding 400 kilometers a week. I'm like ramping up this fitness campaign to deal with the stress of work and just burning myself into a deep, deep hole. Like I when I ended up in the cardiologist and he's like, you need a pacemaker, which was actually a symptom of my nervous system being so messed up, is that I had a, what would they call it? A heart algorithmia anomaly. There was weird things going on and it was a bit of a wake up moment. But I found the opposite end of that where it was like coping mechanisms. So I can see, even as you've unpacked this, it's like kind of the same thing. It's the destruction of the nervous system that's become the pressing thing leading to poor decision making, which is just fascinating. Is that another one you commonly see with business owners or people in general, where it's like they've got their...
Yeah. I did that one massively, man. Everyone does it. When you get stressed, right, you have to release that stress in some way, shape or form. So look at kids, for example. I love that you brought this up, Charlie. You look at kids. When kids get frightened or kids get stressed, what do?
They run away.
Run away, cry, shake. Have you ever seen a kid who's like shaking? They do that?
I have one in my household, right? I see all of these.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like,
I hope he's not too scared in your household. Yeah. You are scary though,
we did
Charlie.
have an event last night where we were concerned a tree was a monster. Things went down.
We've had that. My dog gets that one too. I can understand that. But yeah, when kids will shake, right? They'll shake, they'll cry, they'll run, but there'll be that energy which gets out. So our nervous system, whenever we get stressed, it's not good for it to hold on to it. You need to get rid of that shit. But what do we do as business owners? Well, you can't show emotion, right? You can't show weakness.
You grind.
You can't show all this stuff. You can't talk about it. You can't do it. So we just bottle it up. And so you'll actually find a way to go and get rid of this stuff. I mean, Charley, we talked about this when you've been coaching me, and that, my thing is, business is going well for us. We're setting things up and it's requiring less of my attention. I'm more on the research and development side and training our team and optimizing that sort of thing. And it means that I don't have to hustle and grind like I used to. And it means I get bored. And I come up with all these ideas. And we talked about how I've now got to get a hobby to go and displace this energy. And you've got to put this energy that I would otherwise be fucking potentially blowing up my business. I mean, how many business owners have a really good business, get bored, and like, oh, I got a great idea. This is too easy. I'm going to make this way harder, and we're just going to do a complete left hook on the business and do something new, right? We get that all the time because you need to channel that energy that way. The same thing goes with stress. Is when we have stress, you need to channel that energy out and get it out. And that's where you'll cycle 400 kilometers, every single week. That's where you'll end up going and doing, a lot of guys do drugs as an escape. A lot of guys sex. A lot of business owners lose half of their wealth. Do you know how they do it?
Marriage.
Well, it's not marriage, actually. It's divorce. But yeah, divorce. Marriage is good. I'm a big fan of marriage, big advocate for it. Divorce,
it was a leading indicator.
Not so
That's
much.
what I was going for, the leading indicator.
Leading indicator. Disclaimer, we're not telling you not to get married as well. We're going to put that one there. But divorce.
No, wait, I think we're allowed to give marital advice. I don't think we
can
can disclose that one. I don't think there's a qualification.
No, don't do it. It's a trap.
ASIC doesn't govern that, boys. We're on.
Just don't let Soph, my wife, listen to this episode, please. Just put an exclusion. Everyone but Sophie Welsh. I'll give you her email address, phone number, everything, so she can't see this. Divorce is the biggest one. And why do a lot of business owners get divorced? Because they cheat. They cheat. They break trust. They don't have time. They're off spending and getting rid of this energy in other ways. And so, yes, we need to get rid of that energy, and we need to find a way to channel that energy and to actually utilize it appropriately. We're not taught this. Nobody's ever taught this stuff growing up. You have to find out. I mean, by the time I was 24, had already burnt out twice, right? By the time I was 24, which is ridiculous. You're never taught this. You're never shown how to do this. And I think that's why we have so many guys who reach out to my team and I for help, because there's nothing at all on how to fix this. So what we need to do is, once again, as you said, Charley, it all comes back to the nervous system. When you have this stress building up and you have this business, which could be doing really well, but there's a lot of pressure on you, you need to find a method of getting rid of that, because otherwise I can guarantee you'll fuck yourself up in some way, shape or form. It could be porn, it could be drugs, it could be food, it could be infidelity, it could be any of these things. Exercise. And people also think, exercise, that's a positive one. Well, it's not so positive when you're talking to your cardiologist about getting a pacemaker. It's all these extremes, and we need to monitor it appropriately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I also think there's a massive difference between fitness and health, right? And it's like, in my case, it was actually coping and addiction. It was way too far. Anything can be taken to the extreme in that level, which is the point of it from there. Now, before we get into some of the strategies and tactics and things like that, I wanted to take a moment at this point just to have you share some of the results you've gotten, James, because I know some of the people you have worked with, and it's been like some astronomical improvements in the areas of business and wealth, which is counterlogical, right? Don't get me wrong, they look phenomenally better as well. Like their physical appearance and health is better, but it's like these interesting things aside from that of impact that I think are particularly notable. Can you share some of those stories? And I think you know the people I'm talking about, so go nuts.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of different guys. I mean, obviously, we worked with the Sales Sniper boys and throughout their team, and they are so fun. Like, seriously, what a cool bunch of dudes. So Coach Matt, Coach James, Coach Jeremy, Jeremy Minor, that is. Matt Boone or Matt Ryder, as you'll know, James Sackle, Jeremy Minor. They're all awesome guys. We coached a very, very large number of their team. And we got some really cool results.
Can we pause it just right there?
Yeah.
So what makes this particularly interesting for anyone listening to it is when you've got sales guys, they've got weekly data on how they perform on the phone.
Yeah.
So they're on the phone every week, and they've got how many calls did they have, how many people did they close, So when they're working with James and they're tracking their performance, that's what makes this so fascinating in my mind, where for a business owner that's in manufacturing, let's say, you may not necessarily have this type of direct feedback loop. But sorry to interject, it's just that's the part I find really fascinating here, James.
Thank you for making sure I didn't skim over that bit, because like when we work with these guys, close rates go up every single time. Close rates go up, output goes up, productivity goes up, efficiency goes up, everything gets better. Have you ever talked with a sales guy before who just really fucking hates their life? Right?
Because they deal with no's all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Totally.
No. Ah, man.
As someone
people
who
are assholes.
likes to be sold to, who appreciates being sold to, when I get a lackluster sales guy, it's really disappointing for me.
Super
I must say.
disappointing. You never want to buy.
Are you the type of guy that tries to guide them through the sale, Charlie? You're like, hey, sure you don't want to ask me this question next?
I go as far as sometimes to go, I might need to talk to my wife about it. And then
Just to see?
I'm not sure if I have the money as well. I'm like, I'm giving them the cues for the objections. Like,
I love it. It's fantastic.
Dude, there's nothing worse than someone who doesn't who's a sales guy who just isn't there. You know what I mean? Who's not onto it, and we notice that with a lot of guys, sales guys who are tired, who are burnt out, who are anxious. They're not going to perform well. I mean, think about you once again. When you're hungover, you don't feel great. If your sales team is hungover, how do you think they're going to be performing? They're going to be blowing you massive amounts. And the sales team, that's a really interesting one too, because that's a double whammy. If you have a poor performing sales team, if your sales guys are anxious, if they're depressed, if they're bipolar, if they have any of these issues which are impacting them and making their performance poorer, number one, you miss revenue, right? You miss out on revenue, which costs you. Number two, your cost of acquisition goes up. So any marketing expenses that you have, any lead flow that you have, that goes up. So you're paying more for every customer. You're getting fewer customers. You're getting less revenue. But on top of that too, guess who's getting more revenue? Guess who's getting more customers? Your competitor, right?
I was going to say Nescafe or Starbucks,
Nescafe,
the coffee manufacturers, because we're all hitting that stuff harder. They're making the killing on all of these
banks.
James.
Them and Xanax, right? They're
Absolutely
crushing it. But like when you have your team who's performing poorly, like you miss out massively. You just get smashed on all fronts continually. And it's such an easy thing to fix. Can you imagine if every time your sales guy picked up the phone and talked to somebody, you knew that he was going to do a really good job. He was going to be super consistent. And I'm not talking about like he has to be like totally manic and like working 24/7 and just absolutely perfect. But like, can you imagine if your sales guy was a consistent 8.5 out of 10? You know how most sales guys, they'll go through and they'll have peaks. They'll have like 1 day or 2 days where they're a 9 out of 10, maybe a 10 out of 10, and they drop down to a 4 out of 10 and spend a week or two there. Then they have 1 day of greatness and then they're back to being shit again. Right? What if they were just like a constant 8.5 all the time?
Unicorns.
Right? That's what we make. We're unicorn manufacturers, Grant. That's what we do. And that's effectively what we did with a lot of the sales sniper guys.
Totally.
And this applies well past sales guys, although I think it's a great study for you because of the immediate feedback loops in data. It's really interesting, but like this could be applied to management. This could be applied to video editors, right? And how creative their work is, right? It's a systemic output across, I think, all layers of business, not just the business owner, but the team that supports underneath it. Now, James, you've hinted at this before, and in the idea of waking up and feeling tired as being one of the signs. How can a business owner or anyone listening to this podcast best assess where their health is today? Because this is like an invisible hangover. The awareness to it isn't there. So is there anything else someone should look out for? Is there tests they can get done or blood work or any other general signs you would think present that someone's health isn't where they should be?
Awesome
or
question. The easiest thing by far is, are you 100% happy with where your life is right now? Right? That's the easiest thing. Are you making the money that you want to make? Is your business as successful as you want it to be? Next thing, when you look in the mirror, are you shredded and jacked? Have you got a Grant 4-pack? You looking good like that? Are you feeling good? Is your sex drive good? If you're wanting to throw a leg over, really in business owners and you're in a relationship, I'd dare say that's quite common. You're looking to throw a leg over 4+ times a week, you're pretty good. If in your relationship, like connecting well with your partner, if you're doing all these things really well, if you're feeling really good, then you're great. But the difficult thing is that most people don't tick all of those boxes all at once. If you're missing any of those things, so if your business isn't where you want it to be, if you're not making as much money as what you should, if your sex drive isn't great, if the way that you feel and way that you look in the mirror is not great, if your relationship's not great, I also forgot to mention, if you feel anxious, if you feel stressed, if you feel depressed, if you feel highs and lows, if someone comes in, they're like, oh no, I just lost $100,000, and you react or you get upset or you feel like it throws you off, then you're not in a position where you should be, and you can be way better. And being in that position is going to cost you a hell of a lot of money. It's going to cost you your health, and it's going to cost you your happiness as long as you're there. That's the easiest one. Going beyond that, like, and looking even deeper, to be perfectly frank, I think that's actually the best test. A lot of people like blood tests. And I'm going to say one thing, which is probably the worst marketing ever. I probably should tell everyone, you need to have exactly 27 nanomoles per liter of testosterone. Otherwise, your testosterone is not good enough. And that'd probably be a smarter marketing thing, but I don't think it's the most ethical thing to do. The most important thing is how you feel. If you don't feel like every single day, you are the fucking man. If you have one day where you have a chink in your armor, if you have one day where you're a little bit weak, then you are going to inevitably be leaving money on the table and happiness on the table. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I've got a sub-question to go with that. How do you feel about things like these Apple Watches as an assessment? Because I must admit I've become slightly obsessed with the heart rate data and HVR data, and have found it to be semi-accurate for how I feel. Even if it's not like accurate in general, it seems accurate to itself. Right?
Let me rewind. When Charley says semi-obsessed, every morning at 5 a.m. we might send screenshots of our Apple Watch data to each other.
Sleep data, resting heart rate. Oh, it's pretty cute.
Maybe.
That's very cute. You guys should get married.
We're married like that. What can we say?
Yeah.
So yeah, where's your
goals.
place on those things?
I have an Oura ring, by the way. That's my thing. There's a couple of issues with it. Actually, sorry, first of all, I will say I like them, right? But there's definitely a couple of issues with them. Number one, they're not accurate. That Apple Watch is like 50, 60% accurate at best. So it's nice having data. It's great. But also, Charley, you could message me in the morning and I could have a stab at your HRV and tell you what it is, and it'd probably be a similar amount of accuracy, right? So not to say that it's terrible, but it's the risk of it being wrong is quite high. The next thing after that is that just because your HRV is good, or just because you've had 3 hours of deep sleep, doesn't mean that you actually feel good. And so sometimes when we have these biometric devices, and by the way, like, there are millions of different data points within the body. HRV, heart rate variability, is great. Resting heart rate is great. Deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, sleep cycles, they're all brilliant. You know, even if you get into some of the head pieces and you start looking at the brain waves that you have going on, they're all brilliant. They're all absolutely fantastic measures. But if you wake up feeling shit in the morning, you still feel shit, right? Just because your watch or your ring tells you, oh, you should feel good. If you don't feel good, you don't feel good. Does that make sense? So it often confuses how you feel for what it says how you should feel. Cool.
It was one of these. It was actually interesting. One of the things that I found challenging when I was on my, 12-month downward cycle, which I got out of after that quite quickly, was just how progressively, sort of how much it progressed downwards to the point that I actually did not know what a good benchmark was anymore. Right? Like, it's almost like it reset what I defined as feeling good. And so I'm curious, is there like, I just then jumped on a scale and I'm like, oh, wow, I've gained weight. Oh, wow, I've stopped meditation. And that was kind of the thing. And then someone else calling it out. Is weight one of the things that is an indicator into this?
Even better than weight is how you look, right? If you look in the mirror and you don't have some semblance of abs, right, not good. It's as simple as that. For your professional athletes, I always have a rule: if you don't have veins through your abs, you're fat, right? And if you're, if you're a business owner, you want to have some sort of abs, right? The reason being is it's twofold when it comes to health. Number one, if you are overweight or if you're holding body fat, then it means that you're going to generally have, potentially have some sort of insulin resistance, particularly if it's around the midsection, right? Insulin resistance immediately increases your risk of a whole heap of diseases like heart disease, I'm pretty sure cancers, diabetes, all this sort of stuff, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing after that is, how some people, they just get watery, like it just looks a bit soft and really jiggly. Like fat's fat, but there's some people that get like really jiggly and it just doesn't look like healthy at all. When you have that, you have excessive abdominal water retention. And I see this all the time in guys who are chronically stressed. The way that this happens is there's a hormone called cortisol. We've probably all heard of cortisol before. Cortisol is the hormone, which is the stress hormone, the major stress hormone within the body. And whenever we get an increase in cortisol, we get an increase in water retention. Now, cortisol is bad because chronically elevated cortisol is bad. I'll rephrase that. It's bad because, number one, it makes you look like shit. It'll make you look fatter than what you are. Nobody wants that. But number two, it reduces your sex hormones. So in men, it'll reduce your testosterone and your estrogen too. In women, it'll reduce your estrogen. And that's when we start getting a whole heap of negative impacts when it comes to our hormones. We lose our sex drive, we lose our confidence, we lose our charisma, we lose our ability to connect, and it actually makes us more anxious, right? So whenever you have elevated levels of cortisol, your life's not going to be fun. And a really easy way to tell is just by the amount of water retention and fluidity you appear to have. Does that make sense?
I get it in my cheeks. It's I actually see it in my face as well. Very, very noticeable at times when I've had that.
Night's sleep, bang, comes up, huh?
Does. It's fascinating. Now, James, you're kind of hinting on the idea of like a level of fitness is required and health in general. I would love to know your opinion on this. Let's say someone is a business owner, is the level they need to be at is what I would call athlete fit? Like, do these guys need to be at the same level of fitness that you would consider someone who is an athlete? Or is this something where there's like, if an athlete is a 10 out of 10 and there's a scale in this example, is 5 out of 10 fitness where business owners should aim for because maybe they don't have the 20 hours a week to be athlete fit?
Totally. That's an awesome question. So first of all, you don't have to do anything. You can sit back on the couch and suck bongs all day, for all I care. It doesn't matter. As long as you're happy, that's the most important thing.
That is not at all why people listen to this show, James. The title of this show is Business and Investing. People listen because they want to be rich and loaded and be at the absolute fucking peak. Well, that's what we're seeing.
Well, then if you want to be rich and loaded at the absolute fucking peak, then what we need to be looking is, okay, how much do you actually want to peak? And by the way, too, with this, there's this really bad misconception that in order to have elite health, you need to put in elite hours. You don't. It's actually really, really easy. I don't even lift weights anymore. I don't train. I just do jiu-jitsu because I like strangling people. That's it. It's very fun. I highly recommend you take it up. But with it, you don't need to train hard. I train 5 hours a week type thing. It's not that much. And so that's the first thing. In terms of where you want to be for like elite performance, if you really, really want to have peak performance, here's where you want to be. Number one, you want to wake up every single morning feeling fucking incredible, right? That's the first most important thing. You wake up and feel fucking great. That means when you get up, you don't look at the alarm or look out the window and think, oh my God, I just want to go back to bed. You feel like you want to be alive, okay? The next thing after that we want to make sure that you're feeling is confident. If you're second guessing yourself, if you're continually doubting yourself, if you don't have self-belief that you can go and conquer the world, then that's going to be a problem too, because that's going to impact your ability to perform. Because that leads into anxiety. Whenever you have that lack of confidence, that self-doubt, you have anxiety, which is present. And anxiety leads to increased cortisol, as I was talking about just before. It means that your sympathetic nervous system is activated, so your nervous system's not terribly happy. Your sex hormones will be lower. Your testosterone will be poor if you're a man. Estrogen will be poor if you're a woman. And you won't be able to lead your company and to lead your family in the way that you actually want to. The next thing, if your relationships aren't good, right? Most of the time when a relationship's not good, it means that both partners don't necessarily have a great sex drive. Sex is really important. You should be throwing a leg over really regularly because sex is part of connection. It's part of communication, intimacy, all really, really incredibly important. So if you're not doing any of those things, you're not great. Now, when it comes to the body composition stuff, it's important, not as important. Doesn't matter a whole heap, but I definitely recommend that everybody has some semblance, or all men in particular, has some semblance of abs. And all women should look in the mirror and feel good. You know, that's how you should feel. You don't need to be a shredded bikini model or, you know, jacked like a bodybuilder. None of that is necessary. It doesn't matter at all. But you should look healthy. If you go and you look at the photos of people who lived a couple of 100 years ago and see how they looked, you know, or look at a lot of the indigenous tribes around the world, like the Hadza, who are currently still going, and they're like not really in contact with Western civilization. You see how they look. That's generally how you should look, because that's a really healthy, well-functioning body. And another thing too that I haven't touched on is if you have pain throughout your body, you need to fix that. That needs to go. Right? You can't have pain, because whenever you have pain, you're not going to be able to focus all your attention on work. So if you have pain, if you have discomfort, if you have tension throughout your body, you need to fix that. It's not a good sign. A healthy body should be a pain-free body. It should be one where you move effortlessly and easily and you feel good all the time. And I guess I keep coming back to that. The most important thing is that you feel really good. I know it's a subjective measurement, not the best one for marketing, but I encourage you guys to learn about it way, way more about how you feel.
Do you know what though? I like you have mentioned that, but you've kind of put the layer into it is that we lie to ourselves. Like feel good is if you've been hungover for 3 years using your analogy, right, and you don't know what feeling good is anymore, your awareness to that becomes
well, your benchmarks changed.
Yeah, your benchmarks changed. What do you mean? I do feel good. I had 8 coffees today and a line of Coke just to get to this podcast, but it's like I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. So as much as I concur from that, I do think it's important for people to have markers around it. And you mentioned so many good ones there, James. So many good ones. So Grant, I'm going to kick it to you though, because I can see you itching to ask your question. So you jump in before I
All right. James, I've come from the world where my morning routine used to be 2 hours, and then I'd have a meditation in the middle of the day, and then I'd go and hit the gym in the afternoon. So all in all, and a day for me to keep healthy, both from a mental perspective but also a physical perspective, I reckon I was putting in easy 3.5 hours, 4 hours.
That's a lot.
Day, right? And that was too much to the point.
I don't know about it. Showed.
Maybe.
I knew you at that point of your life, and I would say you were like beaming.
So I would get a cut and it would be fixed in 24 hours. Like I was Superman. It was happy days. Is there, from everything that you have seen, is there an amount of hours a week, amount of hours a day, or some kind of benchmark that people should be allocating towards their health, mental, physical, however you want to portray it?
Can we add another layer to this? Let's make it really interesting.
Totally can.
Can we define some like the areas as well? So to give you an example, if someone's going to put 10 hours a week in, they should spend 2.5 on mental health, 2.5 on physical, 2.5 on diet and meal prep, or whatever is appropriate in your view, James. So
can I throw one more?
Yeah, let's make it hard. He's pretty good at what he does.
Because I know what James is going to say, because you mentioned that it's like 5 hours of jiu-jitsu, but I'm like, well, you're at a very good level of physical performance and you are almost at peak, which means you're maintaining peak as opposed to building peak. So if you're coming from starting at -10 and you're trying to get to 0 and then you're trying to get to 10, it's like,
for the average man.
You see what I'm putting down, Charlie?
So what we'll do then is if it's okay, I'll answer this in like several different stages. Then we'll start like really simple and basic, and then we'll get more and more advanced as we go. So simply put, just do 10 hours a week of exercise. How many hours do we have in a week? It's like 168, isn't it? Is that right? Something like that.
Yep.
Whatever.
I'll let you do that one.
We have 10 hours. Just do some sort of exercise, right? Go out, go for a walk. You know, you don't have to jump on a fucking treadmill or go to the gym. Do what you want, but just move for 10 hours a week. Like that's it, simply put. And in that, incorporate, roughly 30 minutes per day into doing like a Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, or meditation, something where you're totally present and you're actually able to focus on training your mind, right? That's really, really important, just as a super baseline. Next thing after that, in terms of where you started. So obviously, I was a pro bodybuilder back in the day. So I was training 6 hours plus per day. My whole life was bodybuilding. That's everything that I did. So yeah, it definitely gave me a big advantage. But the majority of the advantage is just physical. It's just the fact that I'm always, 6% body fat. I've got veins through my abs all year round, and I don't really have to try very hard to maintain it. So it's not like that's it definitely helps me with that. But in terms of the cognitive performance goals for the stuff that really matters. So in terms of me being a better dad to my daughter, Layla, and me being a better husband to my wife, Sophie, and for me being a better business owner, it doesn't really change things terribly much. I take my dog for a walk in the morning, every morning on the beach. I live up at Noosa. It's the world's most amazing spot. Grant, Charley, you should move here. Grant, we almost had you.
Almost had you.
I kid you not, I was looking at property on Coolum Beach last night, but we won't go there.
Yeah, you should look at that. It's a very good spot. It's going to do really well at Coolum Beach in the Sunshine Coast. Disclaimer. But you should all move here. But yeah, so
we haven't touched on legal advice yet, guys. It's still time. Right. But anyway, come back.
But so where was I? And in terms of like how much do you actually need to do and what do? I walk my dog for an hour in the morning, right? So I go and do that. I meditate and do qigong for probably like 20 minutes a day type thing, maybe half an hour a day. And then on top of that too, you do jiu-jitsu 5 hours a week for about an hour or so. Like that's pretty much it. Now, if you're someone who's heavily overweight, what I would recommend you do is first of all, go get some individual advice. You know what I mean? Like I can tell you roughly what to do, exercise your 10 hours. That's going to do some good for you, definitely. Because if you're exercising half an hour before and now you're doing 10 hours, well, you're going to be 9.5 hours better per week for it, right? But the most important thing is go out and actually chat with someone. All of this stuff is really, really specific. In all of our coaching, we still coach one-on-one. You know how in the coaching industry, I'm sure all you guys are familiar with it. Everybody does group coaching because it's more profitable. You come in, you sign up to a course, and you jump on a few Zoom calls a week where, you get to talk with like 30 other people and maybe you get your question answered, maybe you don't, right? That sort of thing. We still do one-on-one, individualized everything because that is the only way where you can guarantee optimal results for you guys, right? There's a very specific reason for that. And partly because, I'm not really that mad about money. I don't really give a shit. I've already made plenty. And I'm in a very fortunate position to do so, but also because I actually love what we do. And so with that, it's really important that you go and you talk with somebody that you trust, that you like, that you think knows their stuff, and you listen to them, you get a plan for them, right? So if you're not at optimal health, that's what you need to do. It is putting in a couple of bucks into your health is the most simple, easy and highest ROI thing you can do, because you only need to get on a roll for 6 months, a year or 2 years, and you will stay like that for the rest of your life with very, very little effort, right? Super, super high ROI. And in terms of like, as we're getting more and more specific, if you're already an elite athlete and you're already performing at a super high level, you may not need to put in, if you're looking to, and by the way, if the goal is for you to optimize your health for your business, for your ability to make money and for your ability to provide for your family, if that's the goal, if you're already an elite athlete, you may want to start putting more time into training your mind. Actually, anyone should probably do that. Training your mind is incredibly important. So when it comes to the nervous system and the mind, they're practically the same thing. The mind, the soul, the whatever you want to call it, right? Your chakras, like it's all part of the nervous system stuff that I talk about. You'll want to train that to a much, much higher degree. For example, Charley met me back in the day and Grant met me too when I was what you would probably say a little erratic at times and a little excitable, where I would do things on a whim and, not necessarily think about the consequences of such, the second order consequences and so on and so forth. And what I had to do by training, using meditation, studying philosophy and learning and getting mentored, I had to learn how to be able to control my impulses, how to slow down, how to be a better people person, how to manage my team better, and essentially how to manage my stress and manage all of my responses to a much, much higher degree. It's probably one of the most crucial areas of health. And I'll tell you why. Because as soon as you start managing your responses to stress, as soon as you start managing your responses to stimuli and changing the way that you think so that you become a higher level person, you'll immediately look better. You'll immediately start losing weight. You'll immediately, be able to lead your team to a higher level. You'll immediately connect with your partner on a much, much deeper level. Your hormones will start getting better. As soon as you start training your mind, your whole body will follow. So it's really, really important that we don't neglect that. Really important.
All right, so we've covered exercise and then what I'll call mental health. And then you've even mentioned, particularly if someone needs to lose weight, they may need some individual advice, which I think is very interesting because even in the example of Grant and I, Grant can eat a very high-fat diet and feels fantastic. I can eat a very high carb diet and still see my abs. But if we swap, and we have tried that at times,
no chance.
Feel terrible. Actually feel terrible. So individualism and genetics and DNA definitely play a role in this whole equation, as well as what past experience is. So where do we look at from the perspective of food here? Is this, because diet is clearly a big portion of it for someone as well. Is this too deep in the weeds where, look, that's going to be personalized, where someone needs to seek a nutritionist or an organization like your, James? Or is there any generic stuff you would really look at here?
Yeah. One thing to remember, if you go and you start becoming tribal with your diets, you're going to fuck up, right? So we've all heard of all these diets. Everyone's like, oh, vegan's the newest and best thing. I can categorically say that being vegan is a terrible decision. But anyway, if you want to do that, you do you, right? But people say, oh, vegetarian, you got to be that, or paleo, or keto, or carnivore, or intermittent fasting, or all that sort of stuff. If you start going tribal, you will get it wrong, okay? Straight up. So don't go tribal. The most important thing that you can do is understand what you need for you. So this is where the individualism is coming in. But at the same time, train your nervous system. The body's really, really interesting because it knows what it likes. It knows what's good for it, and what's not. The issue is that most people have an issue with communicating with their body. They do not communicate or understand their body. Charley, you said, if you can eat carbs all day, you feel great. But if you have a high fat diet, you don't feel great. Grant, you're the opposite. You guys have understood that because you've studied it, you've nerded out on it, you've gone deep, and you've looked at your body and assessed how it responds.
Run a good size test on each of them, right? Being open-minded to it, and then categorically said terrible idea or great idea.
Totally. And we've got to listen to this feedback that the body gives us, because the body will tell us what it needs. You know how women get cravings for chocolate around their period, right? Because
I wasn't actually aware of that, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, it's really common. Loads of women get this. They get cravings. You get cravings for different foods based on the micronutrient deficiencies that you may have. And so when you actually learn how to talk to your body, you learn how to, not talk to your body. It's a bit weird if you talk to your body. But you learn how to listen to your body, you'll actually be able to understand what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating. I do really, really well on low carb, high fat diets, high amounts of protein. I'll eat 1 kilo plus of meat every single day and I feel incredible, right? And it's really, really great. Other people can't do that. The most important thing is to clear up your nervous system so that you can listen to your body. Because if you're stressed all the time, what happens is your body craves dopamine. Dopamine's a neurotransmitter which people get from cocaine, from alcohol, from shitty food, from all that sort of stuff. When you get stressed, your cravings for dopamine go up, which means that you can't listen to what your body needs, because its most important thing is to nullify that stress by getting the drug, the alcohol, the palatable food in. It's where people start craving chips or lollies or things like this, which have no real micronutrient need, they feel no deficiency within our body, right? They feel nothing at all. All they do is just satiate our requirement for dopamine. And so whenever your nervous system's jacked up, that's what you're going to be doing over and over. When you calm your nervous system, you can actually listen to your body and you'll eat appropriately. When you start eating appropriately, guess what happens? You start feeling better. You've got more energy. You've got less anxiety. You've got less stress. Remember, your gut controls your brain. We've all probably heard of that by now. Everyone's harping on about it these days. Your gut controls your brain. If you're putting shit food in, your gut's going to be shit. Your brain's going to be shit. Pretty simple, right? So you have this whole positive cascade that starts going on because you start eating better, you start eating right for you, you start having increased levels of testosterone. For men, you have an optimized testosterone to estrogen ratio. You start looking better because you start feeling so much better. You start moving more, and it just keeps going on and on and on because you feel better, because you look better, because you have a better sex drive. Your wife doesn't get the shits with you as much, and so your stress goes down even more. It's wonderful, and it just keeps flowing and flowing and flowing. Does that make sense?
Just as it would the other way, where it's like shit food and everything else goes negative.
That is literally the exact experience I had. When I did the high-fat Grant diet because he was telling me how good it was. Terrible advice, right. Grant. You gave me individual health advice. I'm going to sue you.
I gave you a disclaimer when I said it. I did say this is not health advice.
The feedback I kept going was like, I feel like I'm slow and sluggish. I can see I'm making terrible decisions. I want to have a nap in the afternoon. There was so many signs, not on the scales or aesthetically, that were telling me this was a bad idea. There was my subconscious, my nervous system, whatever it was like, terrible idea. Get off this. What more do I have to show you that this is not a good idea? was like the experience of it.
that
Very,
was-
very fascinating. And just one more point before I kick over, the knock-on effects, right? How one thing kicks into the other. It can be as simple as diet or stress in business or not exercising, and then systematically one leads into the other before we're completely taken down. Now, Grant, I'll stop hogging the mic. Kick over. Actually, I'll take it back there.
I concur that when I followed your diet of potato soup in the morning and roast potatoes for lunch and then potato chips for
That
dinner.
did work. That totally worked. So he's not giving
Sounds
context.
awful.
All right, we're going to have to tell that story now. So I am going to kick
You
this.
sound Irish.
That's it. Defend.
All right, one of the things that's very common in cycling, and I can't explain why it's common in cycling, is glandular fever. And maybe it's because we all make out all the time, but maybe it's not.
I was going to say,
Maybe.
I've created a monster here. All right.
All right,
go.
so I got glandular fever when I was cycling, and I went to the doctors and I went to a few other places to get some help with that. And honestly, my energy just wasn't coming back. And I went and saw someone at an event, and who was a health advice guy, and I said, "Look, I'm going through this. Do you have any recommendations? Like, you seem like you have some ideas." He said, "Oh, that's easy. Just eat potatoes for 30 days." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, literally like potatoes. Just eat potatoes." And he's like, he had said that the likelihood that my gut was messed up is high, very, very high, and that's destroying my energy. And that there's something magical about potatoes and the starch that's in them, where if you just eat potatoes for 30 days, it'll get you'll be fixed. And I was in a pretty desperate place, I won't lie. So I did it. And what continues to amaze me, and this is definitely not health advice, definitely, is it worked.
That's awesome.
So I don't know where he had that conclusion or knowledge or why he recommended that. I can't speak to the specifics, but it definitely made an impact on me. And yes, Grant did try that as well.
I put it out there. It explains why he makes such good darn potatoes.
Yeah, I do killer roast potatoes for hours.
Eating that shit for 30 days. So, but what I'm curious about is outside of Charlie's potato diet, like what are some of the things that most people think are healthy that you just sit there and like shudder? Like, remember how you were explaining how like your daughter like gets shakes and scared and runs away? You know, when you see those health advice and you're just like, why the hell do most people go and follow that kind of thing? What are like, I don't know, the top 3, top 5 that you're just like, holy shit, this is dangerous and people just should not think that's healthy, even though they do?
All right. If it comes from the government, it's shit, right? Straight up. Okay. Any advice from the government ever? We're all business owners. Let's talk frankly amongst each other here, right? Nobody who's a really high performer and super driven in life says, you know what I want to be when I get older? I want to work in middle government, right? Let's be super frank there.
Hey, brother Steve, I hope you're doing well.
I know quite a few people, but don't worry, they won't be listening to this podcast. Good
you get what I'm talking about, though, right? It's like when you look for your highest performers in the world, like the best of the best, who have brilliant advice, who are super unbiased, who are really objective focused, right? They generally go out into private practice. When the government goes and puts out stuff, generally it's shit. Over in the US, there's this big hilarious thing, thanks to Joe Rogan for sharing it, but like the government over there told people that it's better to eat lollies than have a steak, right? Now, we can all categorically conclude that that's bad advice, right? We all know that. So if it comes from the government, just discredit it. Doesn't mean that you have to totally go the opposite way. There's I have when listening to things in things that come out like stuff that comes out in the media right now and whatnot, I have something called the inverse media law, which means that if the media says it's true, it's probably not, right? And it's the same. It's not totally that far with government health advice, but it's pretty close, right? The next thing after that, veganism. So many guys go vegan because they want to feel better. And a lot of people get really good short-term results. Like in the first 30, 60, 90 days, they feel really good. But what ends up happening long-term after that, you probably know this, Charlie.
Cyclists.
They're common in the cycling thing.
It's
Again.
crazy,
We're making it about
man.
bikes again. A lot of vegan cyclists. I tried it because that's what the guys who were winning races were doing. Felt fantastic for the first bit and then just...
Yeah, they just didn't tell you about the EPO and the iron infusions that they're also doing. Not to cast aspersions
what
of cycling,
goes
cycling,
on
of course.
in the club room stays in the club room.
But it's like veganism, like, cool. If you don't want to kill animals, like fair play to you. I mean, we can go and argue that till the end of day, but the fact is it's not healthy at all because you do not get the required micronutrients that you need. Micronutrients being things like iron, being things like zinc, being things like K2. And so what ends up happening with a lot of vegans is they become anemic because of what they're eating. They mess up their insides and their guts and they start developing the vegan belly. Have you guys ever seen like someone with a vegan belly? It's just like a little pot belly that just sits there. They're really skinny. Vegans are very skinny, slim people with pot belly. Now that's not to say
I might be
that
related to one who has the exact thing you're talking about.
Yeah, totally. It happens a lot. It's really, really common. And then on top of that too, when you start going far enough, if you do not take a shitload of supplements, right? You can do vegan healthily if you take a metric shitload of supplements like this long. You can do it. But I mean, doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of being vegan if you're just going and supplementing everything that you need from your diet? Like just go and only eat pills. That's way better. So it's like you will end up with issues such as a friend of mine. She was vegan for, it was about 10, 12 years. She depleted herself of vitamin K2 to such a degree that her hair started falling out and her teeth started falling out. She ended up getting like cracks within her teeth. So it's pretty hectic. That actually happens if you get down to that stage. So once again, I'm sure you can eat vegan and you can manage it if you take a shitload of supplements. But if you don't, you're probably not going to do terribly well. There's a lot of people that go vegan and then don't stay vegan, right? Because they start feeling so poorly. Next, I'm going to get, this is going to be great for clickbait, by the way. You just need to snap that one up, put it on the internet, and I'll get like 1,000 people with a pitchfork out the front of my house. But see, we'll leave that one there. Coffee is the next one. Get rid of coffee, right? People say, we get emotional about our coffee and we love our coffee and we feel good about it. It's not serving you whatsoever. It's a nervous system stimulant. It irritates our nervous system. It shifts us into fight or flight, and it will inevitably lead to poorer performance in the long run. The next one after that, people saying don't eat red meat. That's the dumbest thing. All right. So Grant, if I can tell you I have this one magical food which will be able to hit literally every single nutrient requirement that you have, it is the most nutrient dense food ever, right? If I have this one food and then I tell you it's bad, right? You shouldn't eat it. Is that a smart decision or a dumb decision?
Sounds silly to me.
Right? So why the fuck would we not eat red meat? Why is anybody ever telling anybody to not eat red meat? Red meat has the highest amount of micronutrients you can possibly get out of anything. Like it has the most, has everything that we need, right? You can get everything. There are guys who only eat. There are carnivores, like literally people who eat just meat. They'll only eat stuff from the beef, from cows. They'll only eat beef. So they'll eat meat, they'll eat the organs, they'll eat all that sort of stuff. Like that's all they do, and that's where they get all of their micronutrients from. And they're very, very healthy. And they do really, really well. I mean, we've all heard of the Liver King, I assume by now that he's been plastered all over.
I don't know, you might have to put him into the supplements category.
Yes.
Very well supplemented diet.
Very well supplemented.
Roided supplements, Charley? Is that what you're leaning towards?
Oh, I hear implants. I hear supplements. I hear a few other things that sound quite interesting, but definitely assisted. It's not just liver.
Yes, totally. It's not just eating liver and whatever. But we won't go too far into it. But you guys have all heard of Liver King. Liver King, not someone who I would advocate for, but that doesn't mean his methods were bad. So unfortunately, he did a real disservice to nutrition and the way people eat. But going back to it, it's like when you eat, like these guys, they can just eat meat and they're extraordinarily healthy. They do extremely, extremely well. So anyone who's telling you that you shouldn't eat red meat, discard that information straight away because it probably comes from debunked studies. And just so that you guys have some context on that too, the whole thing about red meat being bad, it came out because of this. There were some people who were vegetarian and vegan, funnily enough, doing studies on red meat. So first of all, there's an immediate conflict of interest, right? The next thing that happened after that is that they went and they looked at people who were vegan and vegetarian versus people who ate meat, and they compared the two, right? And they were like, okay, who's going to be healthier? And they found that the people who were vegan and vegetarian had lower rates of like cancer, heart disease, all this sort of stuff. But if you look into the study and look at how they did it, people who eat McDonald's every day, they eat red meat, right? People who are vegan and vegetarian are generally quite health conscious. People who eat McDonald's every day are more likely to smoke, drink, take drugs, do risk-taking behaviors. They didn't control for any of that. So they're like, okay, Gary here chain smokes 10 fucking, however many packets a day and drinks a case a day of beer. And then old Cheryl, who goes and only eats organic and the best of the best. We're going to compare these two. Gary eats bloody red meat and Maccas and smokes and drinks. And then Cheryl only eats the best, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink and whatnot. Who's healthier? Cheryl. Oh, well, therefore you should eat vegan and vegetarian because Cheryl did it. It's the most stupid thing ever. And that's how all this bullshit came about. So anybody saying that you shouldn't eat red meat doesn't know what they're talking about, like categorically, and also probably has some inherent bias or tribalist tendencies too, which are going to lead you away from actually getting to the truth. They're definitely the biggest ones. Actually, one final one, gluten and bread. Just don't eat it. Do not eat gluten. Do not eat bread. Now, that's not saying that every single person who cuts out gluten is going to have amazing results, but I've never seen somebody cut out gluten, eliminate gluten, and not I've never seen someone cut it out and feel worse for getting rid of it. Does that make sense? So probably I'd say 8 to 9 out of 10 people I see who get rid of gluten feel dramatically better. Now also that's allowing for some people may not know how their body actually feels. And so they can't see any difference because they just don't know. But pretty much I've never seen someone go backwards from cutting out gluten, but I've seen a lot of people move tremendously forwards from getting rid of it. I'm talking less brain fog, less skin conditions, acne, eczema, psoriasis, all those things starting to go away just from getting rid of gluten. The reason for this is multifactorial. So number one, gluten comes from wheat. Wheat is sprayed with glyphosate or Roundup, as we'll know it here in Australia. Fucking horrible, carcinogenic, awful thing, massively irritates the digestive lining. Every time you eat wheat, you're putting that stuff in, no matter how hard you wash it, right? Next thing after that, gluten itself is a particular protein which pries apart your digestive tract. So your digestive tract is held together like this. There are these things called tight junctions, and they've got really like small gaps or no gaps whatsoever in between them. And this keeps all the food on the inside and then the blood on the outside, right? Which is kind of how you want things to be. What gluten does is it makes them open and makes it bigger and then allows bigger molecules through the gaps, which shouldn't be allowed to go through the gaps. Does that make sense?
Completely. I'm with you, James.
And so what happens there is we get systemic inflammation. Whenever we have inflammation, the nervous system gets jacked up, gets jacked up, cortisol gets jacked up, testosterone and sex hormones go down, anxiety goes up, stress goes up, and so on and so forth.
It's a very reasonable hit list, most notably the government there.
I'm glad I asked the question, Charley.
I'm gonna get suicided one day, I think. Yeah.
Swatted.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear what is the conventional wisdom of the world and then for someone who actually boots on the ground, the dramatic differences. And it reminds me so much of the wealth space, right? Is if you were to watch TV and see what, for example, the property market is doing right now, you could think it's all going terribly. But when you speak to people like Goose and other property professionals we have on the show, is like the boots on ground experience is very different. And that is massively overlaid to health as well, which I think is quite fascinating. Now, James, I'm very, very appreciative of your time here and everything you've shared. For anyone out there that's listening to this show and has maybe had a moment where like, ooh, need to start taking my health a little bit more seriously here, I can see there's some areas that need improvement. What's the best way they can come and get in contact with you?
Just find me on social media, right? So just drop me a message on Facebook. I'm quite easy to find. So just shoot me a message on Facebook. I'm in the very fortunate position where I don't have to pitch you. So if you message me, don't worry. It's not going to be like you're going to get sent a million different things. If you want help, just shoot me a message and I'll just send you a bunch of information. If you do want to
hold it up there, I'll pitch you. If you get to the point where you're contacting James because your health is not in the place that it should be, you should buy something.
Well, you can buy something. I'll let you guys buy something just because Charley said so. But if you want help, you can just reach out. If you do want to work with myself and my team, I'm more than happy to chat with that. If you just need help, I'm more than happy to give you that help too. Whatever you need.
James, if you can solve someone's health problem and they have reached out to you for a health problem, you should sell something.
Yeah.
Like that's how this works. And for any business owner out there, that's how your business works as well. So just keep in mind, guys, like hugely valuable. And I know, James, in gesture, what you're suggesting here is that, hey, we're not going to slam you with sales calls or hard pressure you into anything or anything like that. And we do appreciate that. That's one of the reasons you're here, is you're a stand-up guy. But at the same time, if your health is in a mess, that is not something to mess around with. It might be the best investment you make is fixing your health. Grant and I can speak to that experience as well. When our health is better, life is better, business is better, wealth is better, all of it.
You can put that on a bumper sticker, Charlie. When your health is better, life is better.
Do you know,
we're looking for a new company motto.
Does it annoy you a little bit when the stigmas are true, or I love it at the same time? It's like health is wealth. It's like
your network is your net worth.
So, some asshole with perfect, health says that and looks at you. It's just like, fuck you. But it's
and
like
a good jawline and shit. You're like, come on, man.
The other, it's like, oh, well, your network is your net worth.
Yeah, totally. Like this, Mr. Popular.
Dude, money won't buy happiness.
All right, before we TARDIS this, I'm going to wrap this
bullshit
episode
as well,
up.
right? That one, I've tested it. It's pretty damn good. All right, anyway, let's wrap this one up.
Awesome. Just want to say thank you very much for joining us, James Cant. And for anyone who's listening to this, if they go, wow, this was insightful and had full of information, don't forget, head over to businessandinvesting.com/newsletter, put in your name and email, and we'll let you know every single time we drop one of these episodes. And remember, health is wealth, or as Charlie would say. Thank you again, and we'll catch you on the next episode.